I didn't go to
No,
RocDev, though.
I didn't go to.
Oh, okay. You didn't either. Okay,
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this evening's panel on the transition from becoming a individual contributor worker to a manager. We have a wonderful panel with us this evening, and we're going to try to start out without sound reinforcement, but if you folks in the back can't hear, just let us know. We do have some microphones, but just not enough to give everybody one, so we'll use that as a last resort. My name is Joe Pietruch. I am a engineering manager of platform products for Forbes Media. I work actually out of the Magic Center right over here with a team of 2 other developers and some interns that we cycle out every semester. My official title changed to manager in September, and that's why we're all here this evening, because I have no idea what I'm doing, and I figured I would ask some experts and see where we come from. And rather than just like slacking the RocDev community and having a thread that might disappear later, we'll have a meetup and share the knowledge with everybody that's here tonight. So thank you so much for coming. And without too much further ado, I'll introduce our panel of experts here, Georgia, Dave, Cherrise, and Dylan. And we'll just go down the line and have you introduce yourselves better than I can. So
Okay.
take it away.
Hi, I'm Georgia. I'm a product manager at Neustar. I've been in a product manager role for probably 7 years, something like that. I work at a larger technology company. We're headquartered elsewhere, but we have about an office of about 30, mostly software engineers, and then a handful of product people. We're over in Woodcliff. I don't know if anyone's familiar with that area. Yeah, I got some smiles. So we're over there, and we're headquartered in Sterling, Virginia. We have offices in most major cities around the world. We have a large growing presence in India as well. Yeah, that's about it.
Hi, my name's Dave. I'm an engineering manager for a company called CloudCheckr. We help companies kind of manage their cloud infrastructure. I have about 12 or 13 people reporting to me currently. I've been doing this for about 3 years now. Our company is over in Village Gate, and we got about 120 or so at the company right now, and looking to grow in the next year. So if anybody's interested, let me know.
Hello, my name is Cherrise Phipps. I'm an IT manager for Frontier Communications. I manage a team of business analysts within the IT department itself. Frontier Communications, although I'm here locally, we're pretty diverse. So we have offices in Connecticut, Everett, Washington, Texas. We're all over. But I think most of you probably know us locally. I've been managing a team for about a year now, officially, if you will, although I've been doing the work probably the last 2 years.
Hi, my name is Dylan Semler. I'm a director of engineering at Flashpoint. Flashpoint's based out of New York City. I work remotely here, so I'm the only Flashpointer here in Rochester. Been a director for about 6 or 8 months now. Before that, I was an eng lead, which also has sort of management capabilities for another 4 months. Yeah, so that's it for me.
Cool. So to start off tonight, I'm going to paraphrase something. Some people are born managers, others have management thrust upon them. Can you sort of tell me sort of what the transition was like for you? Like what motivated that transition? Was that something that you went out and asked for? Like I think I should be managing some people, or did people like your higher up say, you know what, you'd be a good fit. Let's see how this goes. Like tell me about your transition. We'll start at the other end.
About my transition, I feel like I would say that if you were to rank all of the best managers and then rank all of the best developers, I would be higher on the manager list. And so maybe that was sort of recognized, and people kind of encouraged me to, well, people first started treating me as if I was in the leadership positions and asking me for questions, and then I sort of got a formal promotions from there. So I feel like it was more of maybe like a natural selection for me.
Yeah, like Cherrise was saying, usually the work comes first and the title comes second.
Yeah.
And yeah, absolutely. And that's what happened to me. Basically, I don't want to say it was thrust upon me, but what ended up happening, and I started, let me just prefix to say I started out in development as a programmer, developing for many years, and then I transitioned into the role of a business analyst in the project management office. And within that role, I was able to progress from just being a business analyst and progression to be an elite analyst, being assigned to strategic projects. And so I was a sought after resource, and then what started happening is that my managers started asking me to train the other business analysts. And so I started coaching and mentoring those other junior BAs for a couple years and creating training materials. And about 2 years ago, what happened was my manager started delegating managerial responsibilities to me. So in addition to my mentoring, I started managing the day-to-day affairs of about a team of 6, and then it went to 7. And so about 7 months later, I was like, hey, am I going to get paid for this? And so in the progression of things, about a year ago, I actually took on the title and was actually promoted into the position.
Sweet. So that sounds like a really good mentoring pathway. Had you expressed interest in that kind of career track to your manager when you were meeting up?
Off and on. I was very happy being an individual contributor. I'm working on strategic projects and doing the work. I was always one to roll up my sleeves. I like to, I was the type of person, I like working on the projects and seeing it come to fruition. But I also had somewhat of a teacher's heart. I'm a teacher at heart, and so I was mentoring people in the process. So from that perspective, as I transition into the role, I'm really, really glad that I did.
So for me, management was definitely something I was looking for in my next role. And like Joe said, some people are board managers and some are not. I definitely don't think I was a board manager, but it was an area where I think I was lacking skills compared to kind of individual contributor engineering. So it's something I wanted to grow at. So I actually started off as Scrum Master at CloudCheckr, and that lasted about a week or so. And I was helping them kind of transition to Agile and Scrum. And then it kind of quickly morphed into a management role and an engineering manager, having people report to me. And it's kind of continued to evolve since then, which is one of the interesting things, I think, is that it really can change rapidly over the course of years. As the company changes, your responsibilities can change along with it. So I think that's pretty interesting.
For me, I didn't explain my background super well. So I'm a product manager, which is a little bit different than most of you up here. My management experience has been off and on over the last 7 or so years in my career. For me, it's never been a conscious choice to become or not be a manager. It's happened mostly out of necessity. Typically because the product that I'm managing grows, and then all of a sudden, we're like, hey, we really need a support staff, or we need product support analysts, or we need more people supporting the users of this product. So for me, it's always come out of that. It hasn't been something I've been seeking or not seeking the role I'm in currently. I don't have any direct reports. I do play a product owner role with a software engineering team. So those people don't report directly to me, but I do assign most of their work and oversee most of what they're doing.
Yeah, that's cool. So just deviating from the script a little bit, you mentioned sort of like the number of direct reports that you said it's 12 for you, Dave?
Yeah.
Even though you don't have people directly reporting to you, how many would you say, like, across the teams?
Dotted lines.
Yeah.
Oh, like how many people am I sort of like giving work to? Ruby's laughing because I work with her.
25.
Yeah, I mean, I work across a couple different engineering teams. So I'm like the main product person on like one or two of those teams, and there's maybe like one or two other teams that I'm like the partial product manager on. So I'm probably assigning work to, like I don't know,
And then Cherrise, you said
20,
about,
yeah, something like that, 20 people, yeah.
about
Six.
seven?
Mhm.
Okay.
Right now, 6.
And then Dylan?
So I guess you would say I directly manage, 3 leads, and then each of them manages, 3 to 4 people, I guess.
Sure. I'm just curious to sort of see what the relative sizes of teams are. For me, I have between 3 and 6 people that are direct reports up here, and then I also do some remote management with some of our offshore people. So that's like 1 or 2 other people as well.
I feel like I've heard, and it must be true, that like you really can't manage more than 5 people well. Like if you want to do all of the performance reviews and the one-on-ones and do them well, like if you're in a situation where you have more than 5 people, then like your company needs to promote someone else to manage to be a manager.
That's why I raised some eyebrows at 12 there. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh
Do you
dear.
think that's true?
Yeah, I mean, I think delegation is key as you
Yeah.
get more and more people. Like, there's a lot that I offload to product owners, scrum masters, tech leads, and I just try to focus on, I guess, the career development of the people, because I think that's where I'm most valuable
Sure.
in this space.
For the enterprise space that I've been in, usually the idea is you want to have a two pizza team or less. So 12 would be the upper limit, but it's totally reasonable.
Yeah, in terms of like team size, a lot of the reading that I've seen is like 11 is like the biggest, and like 7 might be optimal, but I don't have those studies able to cite them off the top of my head. I just remember
I
them.
think it also depends on what the role of the manager is per company, because if you've got a product owner and a scrum master handling kind of feeding your team work as well as dealing with the day-to-day nonsense of what do you need from another team and so on and so forth, that takes a lot of stress off of a manager's plate to deal with more strategic discussions, with the team as well as the product owners, so on and so forth.
Sure,
Mhm.
definitely. All right, so the next thing I'd like to do is sort of think back to when that transition happened for you. What were some of the differences that you noticed when you were transitioning from one role to another? So like, and rather than like go down the line, if somebody wants to like volunteer to go first, so that way I'm not putting anybody on the spot. Because otherwise I'm just going to start from one end or the other.
What
Yeah.
was the transition like? Is that what the question
Yeah,
was?
so like what was like the biggest difference in the role, or what was like something that you needed to work on when you were growing, and what were the growing pains like, I guess?
I think there was a lot of times in the beginning and even today where it's just like I'm not sure what I should be doing at any given time. Whereas I think when you're developing, it's kind of more straightforward on what you should be doing. You should be working on this feature, reviewing these PRs, testing this thing. As a manager, there's not really a clear direction a lot of times on where should I best apply myself. So it's up to you to kind of see what's missing or what does the team need, or that type of thing, to figure out, what's the most effective use of my time. And then kind of going along with that is like, how do I measure how I'm doing? As a developer, it's like, oh, the thing works or it doesn't work, or it's on time and does what it's supposed to do. As a manager, it's not as clear. So I try to just kind of use the team as the benchmark for how I'm doing as a manager.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with all those points. It's really, really hard to tell if you're doing a good job. And like, I'm sure we've all been in situations where we feel like our manager's a deadbeat, but we're still like chugging along and everything's working, so yeah, like you said, it's really hard to determine like if you're doing well, and that's a huge change. Yeah.
Yeah, I would actually agree with that. And one of the biggest things in the transition dealing with people is dependent on and trying to develop your soft skills when it comes to communication, people management, even conflict resolution, and also at times knowing when to assert yourself as a manager versus, okay, how do I empower my people? Sometimes you have to kind of know where they are, and there's times where you may have to have like empathy, if you will, you know, and be sensitive to what's going on in their lives as well. And just building that trust with your team. So that was the biggest thing as far as the transition, is just those soft skills with communications and trying to get your team of direct reportables to the place where they can trust you as a manager. I think I know when I was a individual contributor, one of the things I noticed, I had some managers where I knew I could trust. I knew the manager had my back. And I had some that I didn't quite like, you know. So I took that and I just tried to make the best use of it as I was dealing with my team of people. You know, the things that I really liked, what I thought worked well for me as when I was reporting to someone like that, and just tried to adopt some of those practices as well. But I would say the biggest thing is the soft skills in dealing with your team.
I was gonna say communication. Oh, sorry. Fair question.
Have you run into any issues dealing with the fact that you are, a minority person, being both a woman and a woman of color, where you've run into problems with people on your team who aren't able to give you the respect that you deserve within that position? Have you run into any of that, where you've had people that don't seem to trust you or don't seem to give you that they should?
So just to clarify, are you specifically as it relate to the team of direct reports or in general?
Team of direct reports, or maybe even other managers at your level who have to work with you, but
I haven't. I started mentoring people, as I said before, probably a couple years before I took on the title. I've never really had to deal with any type of confrontational issues when it came to respect. And I think it's because my work and my work ethic spoke for itself. So I had already built those relationships. So even now with my team of 6, I haven't run into that problem.
Yeah, I feel like when I was an individual contributor, like, there were managers that I didn't respect, and there were managers that I did, right? And like, I tried to think about that as a manager to make sure like I'm earning the respect. And one of the things that I think helps, like, a lot of us are talking about more generic things, but some tangible things, if you're going to become a manager, some things that what might help would be to like keep wearing the hat of your people you're managing. So if you're managing individual, like, software developers, like, be part of, spend at least 10% of the time like contributing to the code base, walking through their pain points, being in their shoes. They'll see you as like, you know, an equal, not an equal, but, you know, they'll see you, like, it'll give you better ability to empathize with their situation, and then they'll also respect you more, like, actually seeing you know that you know how to do the work that they're doing, you know, and so that you can lead them. And the other thing that I was going to say, I don't know if I remember it.
Well, before we go too much further, did you have anything on the previous question?
Yeah, I
Georgia,
was just
or-
gonna say, I think for me, when I moved into a role where I had direct reports, the biggest like thing I had to learn, or the biggest surprise, was just how much you have to communicate. And as a product manager, I mean, I talk all day long. I'm very chatty just by nature, and I consider myself to be a good communicator. But I even felt like I had to up my communication skills, because the people who work for you are really dependent on you for a lot of information. And whether that's information about your product roadmap, the future vision of the company, strategic goals, or even if it's just basic HR information, you know, when am I going to get my bonus, or how do I sign up for benefits? People come to their manager for this information. And I think as an individual contributor, you tend to internalize things. You might keep things in your head, but then you realize, oh, I really actually have to verbalize like what I'm thinking, so that people who work for me, if they're in a meeting, they can speak for me, because they know what I would, you know, where we're going with this product, and they can help share the vision. But if you just keep that to yourself, which people really do tend to do, and I think I've realized you do it more than you think you do, even if you think you're talkative, which I'm very talkative, I've realized I do keep a lot in my head. And it's so important to dispel that information. I mean, you can't always share everything, But I would encourage managers be as transparent as possible, share as much as possible, communicate as much as possible.
Yeah, for me, like I always had the mentality of like in software, just in time sort of policies or sort of lazy evaluation, don't bother communicating until it's needed. Well, it's like sort of my instinct, and I really had to force myself to try to be a more proactive person, and just like I don't want to spam people with information that they don't need. I want to be clear and succinct and relevant, but I need to make sure that I'm being proactive. Like that was definitely a big like change of mindset.
Sure. For me, a lot of the things that I've noticed, like I'm going to echo the not sure what like tangible progress looks like. Like it's easy to like throw up a PR and get something through code review and say, this feature went out, that's good. Taking a step back from that, it's kind of difficult. I was reading a blog post, and I'm not sure if it's one that George shared with me when I originally came for advice or what, but there was one that was saying, I'm a CEO and I like going out and mowing my lawn because at least I can see that something is being done or progress is being made. And then the other thing for me that struck me as very interesting is there are days where I don't even have time to like stop and think for any apparent like period of time. So a lot of it is not so much doing all the things because you can't, there's not enough time in the day. It's more about choosing which things get done and sort of like guiding that process from there. Cool, I'm going to look back to my cheat sheet here. So one of the questions that I have is also coming from one of the articles that George shared with me is the idea of pendulum management. So like you've theorizing that some of the best managers are people that have spent time as individual contributors. They go and they do their management thing for a while and then maybe swing back and become an individual contributor again, sort of taking some of the skills that they've learned there, or making their skills sharp again, staying relevant, or that sort of thing. I guess for the folks that have been at it longer, have you ever considered going back to the individual contributor role? Is that something you miss, or do you see yourself staying a manager forever?
Well, I have gone back.
Okay.
So,
So was that your idea? Was that somebody else's idea? Like tell us.
So in my last role, I had direct reports. I worked at a much smaller company, and when I started there, I built a new e-commerce platform from the ground up. So at first, there was me and a couple engineers, and that was it who worked on it. And then it grew, and that's how I came into my management responsibilities. Was we needed to hire some additional product people to help support the platform and the users and do product support. So we brought in some product support analysts. So that's who I managed, and then I did that for a couple years, and then I decided that I do really love the startup world, but I wanted to experience what it was like to manage a product at a much larger technology company. So I kind of felt like I was like the big fish in a small pond and wanted to be the small fish in a big pond sort of experience. So I left and went to a much larger company. Again, it's not headquartered in Rochester. It's a global company. And just sort of because of that, I used to manage an entire platform, and now I'm one of many product managers who work on a very large product. So people are much more spread out, and we don't have as much like direct reporting to product managers sort of across the board. So for me, management has never been a goal. I want to be a manager. I don't. I've been much more focused on the type of company I want to work at, the product I want to work on. So as long as I'm happy with those two things, I'm happy to switch back and forth between being a manager and not being a manager.
Cool.
Yeah, I think echoing something I said before, I do think it's important to still stay technical as you can be, even if you're a manager. I think it's good for the team to see that you know what you're talking about, I guess. Since you're not writing code, they don't really get to see you contributing a lot. I think they kind of, respect you more if they kind of see that you're not just up here telling them what to do and you haven't been there before. So I try to still be as technical as it can be, whether it's kind of looking at PRs or kind of contributing towards the architecture of things. And to answer your question, I still like the tech side, and I think I would go back if I thought it was a good opportunity and something that's really interesting. I would absolutely take off the manager hat, put the developer hat back on, and get after it.
Yeah, I agree. With the role that I'm currently in, as I said, as a business analyst, so we write the requirements, and I think fortunately, because we have so much work coming into the IT department, that sometimes I get the privilege of actually working some of that stuff. You get some projects and I'm like, oh, this looks like it might be exciting, and you kind of get jealous because you're not doing the work. And so I've had some opportunities, I wouldn't take on something, really, really large, but if it was something that I knew I could just be involved, because I still have to manage a team. So I've taken advantage of those opportunities when they have arise. But yeah, I don't know that I would go back. I mean, I would go back because I still do like the work. I have a passion for the work, and I think because I was in that position before for many years, I display that passion to my team, and I let them know all the time, I'm your advocate. And so I'm always trying to make sure that they have the skill sets, the development goals that they need in order to progress in what they're doing. But yeah, I sometimes pick up a project here and there just because it's fun.
You said something interesting earlier. You said you have a teacher's heart, or you're a teacher at heart. I think that's really interesting because I don't feel that way about myself. I think that's why, I can shift out of the management role very comfortably and easily, and I don't feel like I'm missing anything from my career. But I can see that if you really have that in you and that passion, that you wouldn't get to do that part of yourself if you weren't managing.
Right. Yeah.
That's interesting.
Well, not everybody has to be good at everything. Some managers are great at developing the people on their team. Some people are just great at knocking down the roadblocks.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's more me.
You talked about being an advocate. How do you all deal with the idea of managing your teams, being an advocate for what's going on within your team, while knowing that you technically serve a higher master, I guess, as it were?
So this is like balancing managing up versus managing down, right?
Yeah.
No, I don't know.
Just clarifying. Yeah, and that is a good question. Okay, I would put it this way, because you're right, because I too have a manager, someone I report into. But I think it's important when you're in that managerial role. I mean, I believe that they put you there for a reason. And so hopefully, at least I feel as if, okay, so you put me here, even though I'm going to be an advocate for my team, especially when it comes to their profession and what they're doing, how they're doing their job, and the processes that we're using in order, to be productive. As I talk to my superiors, I'm always conveying that information. Now, there's times like anything else, they may agree with you, or they may not agree with you, but at least I'm having a conversation, and I believe that it's important when you're in that managerial position, you do somewhat have a voice, and to try to use that position to help the company evolve in their processes, especially when you see something not quite working right. So I think it's just important to at least express what that is, and they may agree and they may not agree. And there's a way to have that I call it a crucial conversation, right, with your superiors, but you try to build a case. And they're not always going to agree, and then, well, why? And then they may give you a reason, and you may not have been privy to understand why they're saying no, but once they explain, then you get it, right? But I think it's just important that you take those opportunities to invoke change upward if you can.
Question?
Yeah, he's moderating, so may I?
Oh, anybody else with anything to add? on that one,
I would say that one of the important skills you need to have is the ability to negotiate with people above you, people below you, other departments, whatnot, and make it so not everybody's happy, but everybody's kind of happy, maybe moderately happy. That's the best kind of compromise, when no one's really happy, but no one's really mad either.
So I think what we're going to do is, if we're going to open it up to the audience, I will pass the microphone around, just so, because sometimes people behind might not.
Very pedestrian first question. You said crucial conversations. Where'd you get that term?
Actually, I read a book.
Yes, it's an excellent book, so I wanted a chance to recommend it, because many of the things that appear in management roles that do not appear in individual contributor roles are negotiations and snarky, crucial conversations. So yeah, highly recommended, and good on you for finding it, because
That's the title
she's
of
interesting if you could get into one of her talks, the author.
Which book is it?
Crucial Conversations.
Yeah.
Get the book Crucial
Yeah.
Conversations. You'll have more of these if you're a manager than when you were an individual contributor and got to hide behind your screen.
Right, exactly.
Sure. So I guess building off of that a little bit, could you perhaps tell us some of the time that you may have had difficulty as a manager? Obviously, anonymize it to protect the parties involved, but maybe talk us through something that you found difficult, or a difficult conversation that you might have had.
One thing really sticks out for me, I'll just tell you. Someone who worked for me wanted a raise. I felt they deserved a raise. I went and tried to get them a raise, couldn't get them a raise. Worst day ever. I felt terrible. I still feel terrible. There wasn't anything I could do. I went to bat several times for this employee and just couldn't get anywhere with it. So having to come back and tell them face to face, the raise isn't going to happen, was very, very hard. It was emotional. It was difficult. It was awful. It was frustrating for them. It was frustrating for me. I don't know if I handled it well. I hope I did. I don't know.
Did they stay?
No. Mm-mm. No, but I was very supportive of that. I mean, yeah. So that was the hardest. I don't know. I should probably read the book to find out if I handled it well. I don't know. That was the hardest thing ever. It was terrible. I just, just kept reminding them that they're doing amazing work. I recognize it. The company just wasn't in a place where they could be handing out financial incentives at the time. I said, what else can we do, to, make you happy? And I think what the person hopefully walked away with was at least knowing that I was so proud of their work. And I know as an individual contributor, that really goes very far when your manager verbalizes how proud they are of you, what great work they're doing. I currently now have a great manager, and I mean, he must tell me I'm doing a good job, like, at least once a week. Like, a genuine, like, you're doing a really good job at least once a week. So hopefully I shared that enough in that conversation that, she felt at least rewarded that way. But yeah, that was tough.
I would agree with that. It was a very similar experience, and it had to do with trying to get a pay raise.
Yeah.
And not only for myself, as I kind of mentioned before, I was doing the work probably a good year before I got the title. And so it came to the point where I had to actually build my case to say, hey, I've been doing this for 8 months now. These are the additional responsibilities. And you kind of lay it out. And I had that conversation. Now, I could say that when I first presented that, the answer came back no. And I was a little bit kind of taken back about that answer because I had actually been performing. But what happened a little bit later on, I had another opportunity, and then the answer came back yes. And then I had the same thing happen with one of my reportables where they were actually, prior to reporting to me, they were promised some things and it didn't pan out. And when I got privy of the information, I went to bat for the person because they were really doing the job. I kind of felt as I was seeing the work that they were doing that they deserved it. So I went to bat, and it didn't pan out. And so I had to have that conversation. It is, kind of heartbreaking because you're down in the trenches with them and you're seeing the work that they're doing. But I just said, just hold on. It wasn't a good time for the company for that type of off-cycle, if you will, increase. But I put it on the shelf. But when the opportunity presented itself, I presented it again. And so when I presented it the second time, guess what? It went through. So just never give up. But it's having those conversations to build the trust and to also, I would say, let them know that, and that's what I meant when I said I'm your advocate, saying, I see your work, I see that, the contributions you're making. Just know that I'm going to do what's ever in my power to continue to try to, rectify, if you will, that issue.
The top of the list for me would be having to let people go. I think that's definitely something that you don't really prepare for. You can't really prepare for, I don't think, as an individual contributor. So the first one of that was tough to know what to say. Thankfully, some of our leadership stepped up and kind of helped me through it, but that's definitely a tough one to have.
I really don't have anything that compares to any of these. I've been in this position for 6 or 8 months, and I don't know.
Well, look what you have to look forward to.
Yeah. Right.
Cool.
So I have another comment. Have any of you guys dealt with your peers now as managers with empire building or land grabs, where basically your peers are trying to take away things that you as a manager own from what your teams are trying to accomplish, and then kind of gotten stabbed in the back as part of that conversation or part of that problem?
I mean, I can start by saying that I haven't. At my company, every team is sort of overwhelmed, and no one really has any bandwidth to take on another team's work. So, again, I can't be much help here.
Yeah, and I haven't either.
No, I feel like that's probably more common at larger companies, where smaller companies, there's not really enough time or enough bandwidth to even think about how to do that to someone else.
I don't think that's ever happened to me. There are some people I'd like to do that too, because I don't like what they're. Because I don't necessarily like what they're doing with, a product that relates to mine. I don't think is being managed very well. I don't think I've ever dealt with anything quite like that, though.
The reason I asked it is because as an individual contributor, you only have so much time that you can deliver on a feature, a product, of whatever. Mm-hmm. When you get into management, it's much more oriented around strategy, and even if you're working alongside many other teams, one thing I've seen is you can pretty much kneecap another team by changing a feature slightly and then making their team be much less efficient.
Or relevant.
Or relevant, right. And I've seen that at 3 different companies, so I'm curious how you dealt with it.
Is that is it a political reason for doing that, or is it like?
So, I mean, most of the time, sometimes it's the product owners that basically ask for a feature in product A, but they don't realize that they consume product B's use case. Other times it's just managers basically being cutthroat, and sometimes that's the culture of the company, which is to try to get as large as you can from a management perspective. Not necessarily direct line managers that are managing the people that actually do the work, but as you get up to director or VP, that definitely happens much more.
I will say on behalf of product people everywhere. Sometimes you do that accidentally. Like you might change something. Like I said, I work at a very big company. I work on a very large product, and we could do something, and it has so many implications down the line, and it can be very hard to foresee all of them, or you forget who's dependent on. You know, if you have an API and you forget somebody's using it, and then you take an endpoint away or something, and then you've got a bad situation. But so things like that I have definitely happened accidentally. I don't know. I don't know that I've ever been involved in something intentional.
I've seen companies want to get rid of divisions, and the way they do that is they consume. Like if that division has a small product, they'll integrate into a larger product, and then get rid of the smaller product division.
Great, we'll take the next question. So a few minutes ago, you mentioned a book, presumably about management conversations. I was wondering if anybody else had sort of deliberate actions they took to I don't know, level up their managerial skills, so as it were.
I mean, the only really deliberate action I did was become a manager and then start practicing it, you know, on the job. I tried to read a couple books, and you know, I don't know, it's helpful, I guess, but it's not really that relevant day to day, you know. Yeah.
I've been very
Yeah,
fortunate to have a very active manager in terms of my boss providing me with resources to do better. So he's recommended a number of different books, some stuff from like Harvard Business Review. I need to go back and look at the full list, but some really interesting readings. I'll try and assemble that and post it to the meetup group at the end.
But do you feel like they've changed your behavior, or?
I haven't been doing it long enough to really notice behavior modifications.
Okay.
That said, it has been very enlightening just to sort of be thinking about things in a different way. So one of them, I'm blanking on the title of it, was the general gist of it was don't necessarily, like, people have a tendency to look for the simple answers to problems or the simple logic or the simple reasoning behind why something is occurring. And oftentimes reality is a lot more complicated than that. So you need to sort of break your instinct to try and make sense of the system by your preconceived notions or biases, and rather go investigating and look at the larger thing and sort of go from there.
I think that's an excellent question, and I think a trap that I fell into was not thinking that I needed to keep learning how to be a manager. I think when you're a developer, you know, there's a lot of resources out there how to get better, always learn new things, new technologies or whatnot. And then when you switch to management, that kind of goes away a little bit, or it did for me. So it took me a while to realize that I do need to keep bettering myself as a manager and not just figure it out, not try to just figure it out on my own. So Googling how to manage. No, not that bad, but I think there's a lot of stuff on the internet that
Don't lie, you've done that.
there's a lot of resources on the internet that can help you kind of grow, just like a developer management too.
I think the best tool you can have is, or if you want to prepare for being a management, is pay attention to really bad managers and really good managers, and try to don't do what bad managers do and try to do what good managers do. And I think, you know, throughout your career, I'm sure everybody can think of examples when they've had a bad manager and something that they screwed up, and like it stays with you. Like I could list 10 examples of really bad things bad managers have done. I could probably I could also list things really good managers have done. I think that list is much shorter, and I think that's probably for a reason, because I think there's a lot more bad managers out there than good. I think to be a good manager, it takes experience, it takes the right skill set, it takes dedication, it takes someone who genuinely wants to be a good manager. But I think just really paying attention, like I said, I have a great manager right now, and the things that he does that, you know, that make me feel really good as an individual contributor, the next time I manage, I'm going to really focus on that. I'm going to remember to tell people they're doing a good job as often as my boss does. So, do you guys, I have such a question for you guys. Do you feel, since you all have direct reports, do you feel you like give accolades enough and that you thank people enough and you tell people they're doing a good job enough? Because it's a hard thing to kind of forget to do. Like, everybody gets so busy and like it slips through the cracks, I think.
Well, it may depend on the person. Like, I have one report who is really sarcastic and dry, and, you know, I just don't think he takes praise very well. Like, maybe he does, but I definitely never say good things to him, you know, because our relationship is more sarcastic, you know, like, you know, and like he churns things out all the time, you know. He does a really good job, and it's evident in his work. But you're making me think that I should be more explicit. So, yeah. But other reports, like I you know, one report, like I just started managing her, and I had been impressed with her for a long time. So like the first 2 times we had conversations, I reiterated, like I'm really impressed with the way you're doing these things with your team and running things. And so I do feel like she doesn't really respond, you know. She's like, oh, thanks. You know, like it's not really, I don't really feel like, I wonder, I don't know what she's thinking. I can't tell what she's thinking. So I haven't had great success on that, on that regard either. I don't know.
Do you have any sort of like intentional engagement, like a 30 by 30, where you spend 30 minutes individual time with at least each of the employees every 30 days? Some sort of thing where you provide feedback and they provide feedback to you?
Yeah, one-on-ones. We have regular one-on-ones with direct reports, and then skip level one-on-ones as well.
Gotcha. Is there something that could be incorporated in that so it doesn't feel like a guessing game?
What are you saying, like?
I don't know, you just made a statement that you can't tell what she's thinking, and it's really...
No, I'm saying, like, when I say you do a good job, and she says, oh, thanks, I don't know if she believes me, or if she thinks I'm just trying to be nice to her, or, you know, like, we never worked that closely, so I would be skeptical if someone at a distance, I'm always skeptical when someone at a distance to me is saying I'm doing a good job. I'm like, well, how do you really know? Like,
what do you really need?
Yeah.
You're doing a good job up there.
Right. I've said I don't know to like 3 questions. Like, how can I be doing that? Yeah.
Are we doing good on this topic? Should we do the next question?
Well, actually, I have a question on the accolades.
No, it's okay.
I'm sorry. Some of you have direct reports that you work with on site, and some of you have remote reports. Do you find that those types of accolades and things are easier to give in person, like, hey, great job, as opposed to in Slack, hey, great job? Like, how do you feel that is taken by the employees? Do you feel like the remote employees, it's harder to praise them, or perhaps it's harder to praise the people that you see in person?
I mean, like I said, I've scheduled regular one-on-ones, which are videos, so it's like in person where I say, and like they react and I see their face, you know, like, but it's not like ever off, like in the hallway, you know. But then again, I don't have any in-person reports, so I don't have anything to compare to.
We just rolled out a new recognition system recently that's all over Slack, where I can give them a taco over Slack if they're doing a good job. And at the end of the month, the people with the most tacos get like some kind of prize or something.
Tacos.
No, it's not a taco, it's something else.
That's confusing.
We'll see, this is the first month.
So we have something like that too, and it always ends up being like there's certain teams, they're not even just engineering teams, it's across the company, where they have like a culture of giving tacos more than like, you know, my team. So it was like no one ever on the engineering team would ever be recognized like this way, because they're never...
You guys are too stingy with the tacos.
Yeah, it's like, you know, I don't know. And like you also have like support roles, like the office manager who's getting them all the time, because he's always like setting up meetings and helping people out, you know, like that's his job, is to help people. So I always felt jaded by that. Yeah.
I would agree with you, though. I think like a lot of people can do a better job of communicating when somebody's doing a good job. When you get busy, I think that's one of the first things that kind of falls off, unfortunately.
I have the regular 101s. And actually, out of my direct reports, there's just one that work in the same office that I'm in. And so the one-on-ones, they do become important. And I have them scheduled every other week, for at least a half an hour. Even if we don't have a whole lot to talk about, just to say, hey, do you have anything you want to share, any concerns, and just open up that dialogue. For me, I don't have a problem. I mean, it's nice to be able to have somebody where you can personally say, hey, you really did a good job. But I think it is important, even if you're having a one-on-one over, a telephone conference call or a video type of chat, that you do that. And so I try to do that as much as possible. Again, I think it's because within the IT department that I'm in, we're so busy. I know with the IT, we're always having so much work to do. And I just let them know that, hey, you're doing a good job, and just to try to encourage them in that. And then we also, at least I've adopted a practice where then we get together at least once a month as a team. It's a meeting, that we get together as a team. And so now we're bringing everybody together, and then you can also share, if they're having challenges and how did somebody else, are they having the same type of challenges, and have that conversation as well.
Oh boy, I have like 2 questions now. So I wanted to go back to what you were saying about advocating for your employees and like managing up, so to speak. And I'm wondering some of the details behind that, because sometimes, the manager above my manager, for instance, might not really know what I'm working on or some of my teammates are working on, so might like misattribute work, or if we're working on a new thing, might dismiss it. How is it that you as a manager actually like specifically advocate for the good work that your employees are doing and correctly attributing credit in that sort of way? Is there like an approach for that? That's the first question. The second one is how do you give critical feedback to your employees? Because I have found with many of my managers that a lot of them are very bad at it. So like how do you critically give feedback to your employees?
Do you find that they don't criticize, or that they either
give that feedback in a way that's not constructive, or can be like destructive to a relationship, or they don't say anything at all until it's like, oh yeah, HR just reported you. So like, how do you deal with that?
So there's like the shit sandwich, where it's like you compliment something trivial, and then you say the criticism, and then you wrap it up with something trivial, and that's the wrong thing to do. What's the right thing to do? Like, I've not really had to employ this, but I did go to management training, and they talked about this, and there's a method of like asking you to reflect on how you think you did first, and then you, as the report, give your response to what you think you did well and what you think you didn't well, and then the manager can comment on that. And so it's like way more effective than like the shit sandwich, which is like more phony sounding,
That's a both of those are really good questions. I actually don't remember what the first one was.
Okay, how specifically are you advocating for your employees, making sure they're getting credit, or that the work they're doing is like recognized, so to speak, rather than just like saying you did a good job?
Yeah.
So like saying you did a good job to the people that control their salaries, for instance.
Yeah, I think that kind of goes back to the communication piece and just being transparent with people that, you'll probably have one-on-ones with your boss, just like you have one-on-ones with the people under you, and saying, this person's really doing a great job. They've busted their butt for the past month to get this thing out, or, that type of thing. Just making sure that, like somebody said, you're not keeping things internalized, but you're really over-communicating how the teams are doing above you and also below you, congratulating them and that type of thing.
I think with the critical feedback piece, I will say it's a hard thing to do. One thing that I really would caution people against doing is relaying like critical feedback from a third party. So like as a manager, like if I have a direct report and they're constantly screwing something up for another team, and like that team comes to me, you know, I try to, before I just like run to that direct employee with criticism, I would take some time, like get a little bit more involved, and see really what's going on. Because I think when you just like repeat something that somebody else said, your employee is going to start arguing with you. And then what are you going to say? Oh, well, I don't know. This is just what somebody told me. Like you don't have anywhere to go in that conversation. So it's much more effective if you hear some criticism from a third party, take a little bit of time, oversee more closely, observe your employee a little bit more, see if you feel this criticism holds up. If you don't, I wouldn't even tell the person. If I do think their criticism holds up, then I would sit down and have a little bit of a conversation and say, I observed this firsthand or something like that. I don't think it's always the best approach to just sort of just repeat criticism that you heard from somebody else.
I agree with that. And just having, adopting a practice where you're not quick to judge. Especially your own people, well, in general, but especially your own people. And so if, for example, I have another manager or someone who comes to me about, you know, someone that reports to me, I will go and look at the work, especially if they're talking about the work, and I'll go and eyeball it to find out, you know, whether or not they're adhering to the standards, or if I see something that could have been done better. But I'm not quick to judge.
Right.
I want to gather the facts. And then if I do see something, then, you know, you have that conversation one-on-one. I'm not going to throw them under the bus in front of anybody. You know, you never want to do that. But I'll have the one-on-one. We can look at the work together and then have the conversation about, okay, just tell me, you know, what were you thinking when you did it this way, so I can get into their mindset. And then if I agree or disagree, then I'll begin to mentor and coach as to how I would have done it. Or I may even ask them, what would you have done differently? And have that conversation. And I think that's been very helpful and productive in dealing with those type of situations.
That's a really good question to say. What were you thinking? Like, walk me through your thought process.
Yeah.
I'm gonna remember that.
Inflection
Yeah,
is
like,
important.
Yeah.
Sometimes, you know, because
Yeah.
sometimes we have blind spots, right? We have blind spots as well. And so, you know, if I can understand what were they thinking, then I'm like, okay, so I get it now. But, you know, did you think about this? And begin having that type of dialogue as well.
Yeah, that's good.
Do we have other questions from the audience?
I think I have a question for the panel.
Okay.
Have any of you guys ever had to manage like a really prolific developer that might be like a unicorn, and you have a very hard time getting the most out of them within the context of a team?
Yeah.
Like a what?
Like a 10x engineer.
Yeah.
That like can't communicate with other people, but they do really
Well, even if they can communicate, it might not be a communication problem. It might be more of a problem where they're so dominant in the design and in the production of code that like their what they produce ends up being getting implemented, and it's really hard for other people to follow it and understand it and even contribute it to themselves, because they're just like one guy I worked with, we were peers at the time, and I felt like, man, it would be like a full-time job just to do code reviews for this guy. Like he was just like constantly writing everything. I don't know how he did it, but like, so harnessing that and working with that within a team, like these people are working at places and they must be, I have to imagine some places they're successful, but like, I don't know how to do it, like how to get the most out of them, you know? Like for us, it's just like, well, we can have the one guy who's doing everything and he comes with this really great stuff, but then it's like hard to maintain and it's hard to get contribution from the rest of the team, and no one likes working with him because, you know, they themselves aren't feeling like they're contributing, and he's not really teaching them, and he's always like pushing his own way, and he always has the best arguments. You know, it's really hard to counter his arguments because he knows everything, you know, like, so anybody ever have a solution for that?
Have you worked with that?
Sometimes it's not about having the best people in the industry so much as having the people that work the best with your team.
No, I know. That's what I think too, but I also think like there's potential here to,
If you switch into a team lead, I mean, typically those type of people are ones that are trying to architect solutions.
Yeah.
And the fastest way to slow down an individual contributor is turn them into a team lead, where they have no, I mean, just hear me out. Like it makes sense. But the thing is if they become a team lead and they actually have to explain the design to other people and they actually have to build a component of the system, all of a sudden you're going to get better design out of the system because he's not the only one writing.
Maybe. Okay.
It's you, isn't it? You're the
Well, building on what he said, you said something in passing, that they do this and they ship it and it's not maintainable. Okay, that doesn't count as done. That doesn't count as useful. That doesn't
Right.
count as valuable. You don't have sufficient controls in place if you're letting someone ship stuff over the transom that is not understandable and maintainable by others. Long term, its value becomes approximately zero fairly quickly.
Yeah, but how do you measure that it's not maintainable?
Calling back to a situation, I put in place strong gating reviews on a single piece flow, is a Scrumban workflow that I put in place. And I put in strong gating reviews, mostly borrowed from, the reference is the feature-driven design, which is an old reference, but it's got a pretty good checklist, right? Put in these strong gating reviews, and since I was in charge, I asserted this gating review before it goes into our code base, you'll pass. Everybody in the room has to give a thumbs up. Evidence of design, traceability to whatever the heck you think you're doing,
Right.
some evidence that you've tested something. The integration people who do the build need to be in the room, they need to nod. Yes, I can take your change package. The testers. So the testers were in the room and they need to assert, yes, we have enough, this is testable, right? In the room was required, evidence of code review as well. In the room was required, I want someone who's another developer who had nothing to do with doing this. And I designated them the poor schmuck representative. Because your code needs to include poor schmuck support. The poor schmuck is going to come along later, right? So we've got a developer in the room who had nothing to do with this. And he's got he, she, it, right, has a veto. I look to employ super intelligent shades of blue. Pardon my gender slip. But because they don't actually take bathroom breaks, they don't even need oxygen, they're wonderful. But the trick was, I had the poor schmuck in there who had a veto. I had some other people in there who had a veto. I got the architects in because we had a game in this situation where the architects wouldn't agree to anything and then would snipe later. And I'm like, get in the room and you're gonna say yes or no. Now the rule was, anybody who says no, you need to explain what it is that would change you to a yes. I was in charge. It was a fix-it situation, so I got to be kind of unilateral here. I was the keeper of the process. So I don't actually have an opinion about any of this stuff, all of which was stuff they were claiming they had been doing for a year and a half, 2 years. Not asking you anything else. I'm just going to get you high cover to go do what you said you were doing. The first one we tried bounced 4 times because they were just not doing it. The poor schmuck support, it turns out, we had an interesting inventory of people on the team who were like, well, yeah, but he doesn't understand, he's an idiot. Okay, so you're indemnifying us, or you're indenturing yourself. You're going to maintain this for the rest of time, for free. They didn't like that. So they said, okay, if you want to hand this off and go do something else, other people need to be able to maintain it. I don't know, comments? Do we do comments? Do we hide the hard stuff behind an API that is well documented? I think there's ways to do this. And this put a stop to it pretty quick. Some people don't want to stop to it. Some people stepped up, and it actually accelerated them and what we got out of them. Couple of people didn't want to play. On an aggregate basis, 6 months, 12 months, 18 months out, these high performers were costing us more than they were giving us. As a manager responsible for the investment in a productive function, I need to be willing to see that and make that call. Rather than then go shoot them in the head. Let's demonstrate what I think I'm seeing. I could be wrong. But if not, they moved on. Voluntarily. And we've probably all seen it. The architect, who knows more than everybody, throws the white hot ball of code out. But I can do this faster. Well, why can you do this faster? Because you know where all the bodies are buried. So if I want my team to be throttled to your productivity, that's an okay. That's okay. That's an okay situation.
Yeah.
Right. I also have a single point of failure.
Yeah.
Right. The agile people talk about bus count. You guys know this? Anybody know this? Yeah, but yeah, you know, right? How many people on your team can get hit by a bus and you can still function?
Right.
So there's the counter is the lottery count. How many people can win the lottery?
Yeah.
And you can still function.
Oh, yeah, man. The right number. The right number is n-1, right? Your team's n-1. Get knocked out, win the lottery, get knocked out by a bus. We can still function, right? Guess what? You became a manager. This is your problem now. Thank you for playing.
So when
not that I have an opinion about this one, but that's how you hack that one.
Yeah.
if you were involved in recruiting, would you try to identify these people and avoid them?
No, I'd put a behavioral test in, and I'd be more inclined to audition them, or contract to hire.
Okay.
Behavioral test is if they understand that the locus and measure of productivity is the team.
Yeah.
Right, and then you try to do behavioral interviews and find out if they actually do that, right?
Yeah.
And then it's behavioral interviews are hard. Some behaviors are hard to tease out in these kind of interviews. So if you see certain risks, I'm very much inclined to attempt to hire because it's just we're really bad at assessing this. I mean, ask me sometime about the 2 horrible QA hires that I made that everybody thought were the best thing in the world.
Right.
Okay, and I probably cost the company 6 months each time.
What do you mean everyone thought they were the best? Like
Everybody. I mean, I tend to skipping details. They're the panel, but I tend to use an involved, disperse interview process.
Yeah. Okay. So the interviewees all.
Everybody was like, "This is the best thing since sliced bread. This is a super intelligent shade of blue. We're glad to have them. Yada yada yada." And it was not even 2 weeks in. I was like, "This doesn't feel right." 6 weeks in, I was like, "Oh my God, is this the worst mistake I've ever made?" Well, it's up there. Twice.
Yeah.
So it's very hard, and the architect types are one of them, where it's really hard until you see them there, right? A lot of good developers are driven in part by ego.
Yeah.
Part of what you need, one of the hacks is you move the locus of the ego.
Yeah.
I'm the best contributor to the team's outcome.
Right.
Not, I'm better than all these other schmucks who are sitting next to me in the same cube, in the cubes.
Well,
Yeah.
that's why I suggested the team lead, because the theory behind it is you're gonna degrade them as the individual contributor, but you're going to get if he can replicate what he was doing to other team members, and they can take it over. The theory behind that would be it's kind of the exponential use case. You as a person, you can only do so much work, but if you can teach other people how to do as much work as you do in an efficient manner, maybe not the unmaintainable part, but you get the idea.
Well, you need to ensure that bet is the trick.
Yeah.
Because it may blow up on you, right? Depending on their behavior and how it is they're producing this apparent productivity. So if you're going to try that, you need to ensure that bet somehow. But
sorry.
I mean, I was just gonna make the point where I've had the 10X type or the very productive engineers who are, have their 20,000 followers on Twitter or whatever are made into these tech lead positions, and they're terrible at it because they don't know how to talk to people, they don't know how to communicate their ideas, and so you end up just dragging the entire team down because they are not able to communicate, and then that person's not able to communicate what needs to be done. So it's hard to deal with those people, and I found it effective, at least when I have been on a team with this person, of the manager to directly tell them that you are dominating this space and people can't contribute as a result, and just being open and honest with them and hoping that they correct their behavior, and if they don't, then you know what kind of person they are and if you want to keep them around, because it sounds like this person has potential, right? And so maybe being direct with them to an extent could help. Then again, I'm not a manager, so.
Yeah.
You want a second hack?
Yeah.
Okay. If you can't make them behave like everybody else for whatever organizationally this happens. Sometimes you just can't. Designate a catcher. So you're going to hand this off to this other person who's a minion, who's going to go do all of the icky communication and packaging stuff that is beneath you, right? So people have become architects for the wrong reasons. They're very full of themselves, and you know they're like the bad one that I had that I was talking about. And you do this, and what you're doing is the extraction and making it useful for the rest of the team. They won't do it. You've made it somebody else's problem now. You can actually pick combinations that it's good for everybody. So a hack there is actually you make the catcher an intern, because they're learning.
Yeah.
And it's not something that is beneath the peak of their skill set, right? They're learning. They're also not threatening to the person who's got to be better than everybody. And I'll run it through here so the rest of us mere mortals can understand what you did. And you know, and this is an evil thing to say at a university. This is an almost mandatory hack dealing with founder PhD researchers who have built the product. You need to put a wrapper around them that will extract it for the rest of us poor humans. Yeah, you're laughing because you know.
I love it, man.
No, it turns out they're very smart, and they've done some esoteric thing that nobody understands. That's the point.
Yeah.
The transition to it needs to be accessible to the rest of us poor humans is very hard for them.
Yeah.
So you put a wrapper around them, and you know, you go do this, and you can even let them show up and, oh yes, he got it exactly right. He presented it in like small words for you people. They're not typically that blatant, right? And I have seen some of them, it comes out either way, right? They either sit there on the perch and they stay there. I've seen them come around and go, some of them come around and go, this is great. Everybody understands now and I didn't know how to do that. And they're happy and they're bubbly and they go off and they think their deep thoughts and we're all better for it because, you know, it's hard to be a PhD genius who created a product about your research. It's a hard thing and we often need more of that. So we don't necessarily want to destroy them, right? We'd like to keep them around. We just like to make them useful. And, you know, they typically shouldn't be running software development.
One more back here.
Yeah.
I just wanted to
Hacks,
say something
right?
further to this, that you're trying to solve a person. It's part of a team. You need to bring the team together. And don't let anything pass until everybody can do it. And spend more time in there talking and letting them work. Because you can't let one person destroy the team. You've got to bind to that person to the team so they can't get away. And whether they're dragging people or teaching them, just keep them all together. And don't let the person run away with it.
Have you done this before?
I come from management in different fields.
Okay.
And so I've had to deal with people that are very egotistical, trying to rule over things that they shouldn't be ruling over. And the best way to do that is just to make them, you know, like you were saying, make them, you can't do it until they all understand what you want to do. And, you know, yes, you can do it, but this. And it's something that they don't want to do. And it'll slow them down, allow the team to catch up, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, as a case study on kind of what you were saying as far as making them into a lead, in a less malicious way, we had a couple people who knew a very massive legacy code base and were producing as much as the rest of the team. And we converted them basically to a full-time mentor.
Yeah.
And they were basically just they were just pairing, answering questions, you know, kind of paving the way for the other people, and it ended up like greatly increasing the velocity of the team overall. And they got to kind of deal with different skill set and still contribute in a way that was meaningful.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting that you said that, you know, you've seen the worst side of that. Usually when I have a star next to making tech lead, which is if they can transition into the role, you've made their career better. If they can't transition, it's time to leave. I mean, the way I personally look at it, especially with something that you just said, everyone in general in the tech industry has a 3 to 4 year shelf life before they move on. So you have to assume that this code base is going to be around longer than that person. So that's the whole point of the T-shaped individual, right? Is to make it so when the person that built it moves on, someone else can take over it.
think I have seen it maybe at like more toxic workplaces where like, oh, you're really good at engineering, we should make you a team lead or a manager, rather than using it for the express purpose of making that person grow. It's more that you can write code good, so that means you can manage good.
That's
And
not,
Yeah, just one thing listening to you phrase the original problem is like, it seems sort of like a career growth opportunity for this person, and if you're having those conversations with them, and they're like, this isn't important, I'm not gonna, like, the code is all that's important, that's like a, kind of like a red flag. But if they actually wanna get better at it, it seems like something you should be able to engage with them. And, you know, if you have a culture of fostering this with all team members and like doing review, you know, like, performance evaluation time, of having peers review each other about, do we enjoy working with each other?
Yeah.
Seems like something that can help. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a interesting idea. Like, asking the team, do we enjoy working with each other? And maybe that's something they care about. You know, for all their prolificness, they might still want to be liked. You know, I mean, maybe they don't, but maybe they do, and you could leverage that.
Well, I mean, I think there
Feared.
are studies showing people would rather work with someone who's likable but incompetent than someone who's super competent but a jerk, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
And if you care about the team, like, I don't know, on our performance evaluations, we have a number for like, do you enjoy working with this person, basically.
Oh yeah.
And it, you know, it's really easy to fill out. You know, and you have
Yeah.
feedback, so it's anonymous.
Yeah.
Other questions from the audience?
As we've been like talking over this particular topic, it seems like there's kind of two diverging paths we're hearing. It's kind of like the servant leadership path with like the mentoring and the knocking down roadblocks and stuff, and then like the shepherding path where it's like guide the people who are drifting off back into the fold and that sort of thing. Would you say there's other major roles that you handle, or do all of the managerial responsibilities kind of fall into those two categories?
So like, what are some of the other tasks that you find yourself doing as managing besides guiding people or supporting people or criticizing people? Like,
I mean, there's like strategy, right? And so like, maybe guiding can become a strategy decision, like advocating for tools that enable better mentorship, like you know, better documentation tools and better or things like that, right? Like this is still falls into the category of like shepherding, right? But it's more of a strategic angle rather than like a strictly people management angle. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I mean, there's stuff like reporting out to execs, the progress of the department, of the team, figuring out the tech roadmap, what more forward-looking, like what are we going to be doing next 6 months, next year, next quarter, whatnot. What else?
Giving presentations. I
Fighting
think just to be
fires.
really basic about
Meetings.
it, you're gonna have to give a lot of
Your
presentations.
engineers
Yeah.
don't have to.
Meetings, yeah. Some days are just entirely meetings.
Yeah.
One last question. Favorite aspect of being a manager? What's your favorite thing that you do?
Well, do we count the time when I'm wearing my hat as a developer and writing code?
That's a pretty direct. Yeah.
so none of it then, is what you're saying.
Like mentoring is definitely pretty rewarding when you have a good pupil, right? You know, it's a long game, but it's definitely rewarding.
Yeah, I love working with the team, people, and helping them like achieve their goals. It's a rewarding feeling to see them like accomplish something that they set out to accomplish, and I can help them with that.
It's nice to feel like you're part of a team, too. When I've been managing, like obviously people report to you, but I always look at it like we're all on the same team. And like as a product manager, you're often not part of like a real identifiable cohesive unit. A lot of times it's you and an engineering team, and like you're sort of on the outskirts of that team. Like you're not an engineer, so you're not really part of the team, but you are part of the team, and like do we invite you to the team happy hours? I don't know. Like, so you're sort of, I don't know. It's a different relationship. So I think when you are managing a group of people, you do feel, you get that like, sort of like a relationship aspect to it.
I would agree. I mean, basically just seeing them grow and develop in their craft. Yeah.
All right, unless there are any other questions from the audience, I've got one more. Anybody?
I'm curious. Okay. I was wondering if any of you had an example or an experience of where you tried to change the culture of where you were. So beyond like, modeling the behavior that you want to see and hoping people emulate you, and, trying to offer maybe more direct feedback on top of that. Like, how have you had to do that in the past, and how have you done it?
I think it's hard to change culture. One of the best ways to do it is probably when you're in a period of growing the company rapidly. You can bring in the people that you want to move the culture toward. But it's hard to kind of, if somebody has been doing this and the team has been doing this for X number of years, they kind of set in their ways to all this and say, hey, we're going to change this up and do it this way now. So I think that would be my like, we've had a period where we kind of doubled the size of the company, and we were selective about who we brought in. That we wanted to have good culture fits. And that's not to say that we wanted to change the culture, but we wanted to maintain the culture we had. So we just, as we're bringing in new people, make sure that they're a good culture fit, along with, they have the right skills for the role.
Yeah, I feel like if you want to change the culture, like during a growth period, you need to be deliberate about it, and you need to like be proactive about it, and you need to design a recruiting system that will measure the types of people, that'll measure for the attributes of people that you want to bring in. Like, we, like, through various times at Flashpoint, we had like different interview processes that involved like those riddles, right? And we had like a whiteboard session up until a few months ago, and actually, I don't know, some candidates we interviewed recently, we offered them a whiteboard if they wanted to, and a couple of them actually prefer the whiteboard, but that's sort of separate. But anyways, like, we really had to allocate time ahead of time to revamp that process in a strategic way, to say, no, we want to train for people that are, we want to try to figure out if people are actually good mentors, if people want to do that, if they want to document, if they want to see the entire like life cycle of an issue, from the requirement, the plan, the implementation, the testing, the integration testing, the deployment. Like we wanted these attributes in people, and so like we went through we started with the recruitment process basically and revamped that to make sure we were measuring that. Because before, with riddles and with whiteboards, and we had this code test that asked trivial like Levenstein distance questions, as a take-home test, and it was just like, what are we doing here, yeah. So that's, like I said, if you're like he said, if you're in growth, like you can do that. If you're not in growth, I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, so one of the things I've seen happen, and that was at levels, pay scales higher than myself, but within Frontier, what I've seen happen when you're trying to change the culture, because the culture is going to change over time, right? And so I've seen where they actually would bring in new people, and put them in different positions to help help make the culture change based on whatever that vision is, right? And then I also seen where, they'll move people from one position, into another. And then the third thing I've seen many times is a reorg, right? Where they shifted people around, in order to have that culture be more conducive to where they're trying to go strategically. So that's what I've seen.
I do think culture can be a loaded term also, or like, I mean, you could definitely put in processes that change how you develop software, and that's no problem, but as far as like changing people's attitudes and their interactions and their personality, like that's a lot harder to do.
Yeah.
Like, can we look at the Bills here over Sean McDermott, right? Like, Sammy Watkins hit the road, Marshall Darius, you know, you guys are really talented, but you don't fit the culture and we can't change that. So I don't advocate firing people because of bad culture fits in our case, but you know, it's like the same thing. So I feel like I agree. I mean, I haven't tried, but I'm not optimistic at being able to change people, you know.
Last call for audience questions. Okay, then the one that I want to end on tonight is just what is like one piece of advice that you might give for someone that's starting out management, or what is your management advice?
I would definitely, and this is definitely coming from my personal experience, but make sure that you have a capable replacement for your current job, because you'll never be able to allocate the time you need to grow yourself as a manager if you still have to keep an eye on what you were doing before. And hopefully you have that opportunity to make sure you have a replacement. But I would say, like, if you want to be a manager, like, one of the things you can do is start grooming someone for your replacement as whatever role you have.
Down the line, or Skip, or
I would say going into a position of a manager or managerial position, just asking yourself and really being true to yourself as to what your real aspirations are and what type of manager you do want to be, because there's truly a difference between what I call a person who manages and a person who leads, right? And so just making a decision, which are you going to be, and being comfortable with that. I think that's basically really being true to yourself as to, you know, do I want to progress vertically? Am I trying to just continue to climb the ladder? Or am I okay in this position? And how can I just increase my influence with the people that I'm working with? You just have to ask yourself that question and know what path you want to take.
Yeah, I'd say that there will for sure be times when you have no idea what you should be doing or how you're doing. And if you just make your kind of core responsibilities, like ensuring the success of the people reporting to you, I think that'll help guide you in the right direction. And you can maybe add on things beyond that if you want to take on additional roles, but I think that should be one of the core tenets of what your new job is to help everybody, you know, achieve the best they can be.
I think a good piece of advice is, if you're not self-deprecating by nature, learn how to be. I think people really appreciate that in a manager, you know, having a lot of humility and, you know, pointing out when you've screwed up and getting comfortable with that, I think is really important.
Yeah, like
that's a good
being
one.
honest, but also letting people know when you don't know what you're talking about. Like
exactly, yeah.
Like
transparency.
Yeah. Like if you're guessing, say that you're guessing. You know.
Yeah,
right.
Definitely.
Anytime I want to like announce something, if I have like a new idea, I usually say like, I know all my ideas are really bad, so feel free to ignore this, but let's consider it doing this way or something like that.
I like, you know, full disclosure, I don't actually know what I'm talking about, you know, but as a manager.
That's a good one, yeah.
You know, yeah.
Wonderful. All right. So I want to take this opportunity to say thank you to our wonderful panelists. Let's give them a round. And also, thank you all for being such an active audience. It was great having the questions and the discussion and all of that. So thank you very much for coming out tonight. So,
I want to thank Joe for organizing this one. This was
thank you. I mean, it's kind of selfish and self-serving because I'm learning as much as you all are about this. So yeah, thank you again. So I mean, there's still some pizza and soda out there, unless like the hungry college students came and ate it all. If you'd like to take some home with you, you're welcome to. We'll mingle out in the lobby for a little bit, and then if anybody's sort of interested in walking tours of the building, I can sort of take you around and show you some things maybe. But that concludes our session for tonight. Thanks again. And yeah.